Welcome to the Open Apple Podcast, where we celebrate the Apple II. Whether you're a longtime user, a nostalgic visitor, or a newcomer to the community, join us as we share news and memories of Steve Wozniak's most famous personal computer.
Hi, Em.
Hi, Ken. Hello, Quinn.
Hi, Em. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Quinn. And welcome to Open Apple number 87 for April 2025. OMG, you may be thinking, is this another lost episode? No, this is new content being recorded exclusively in the year 2025 CE. And you may also then now be thinking, is this a reboot? Is this a restart? And the answer to that is also no.
Sorry.
Definitely not.
Yeah, I've just been hanging out with Em a lot in Denver lately. We've been having such a great time. I was like, hey, why don't we get the gang back together, do a one-off episode of Open Apple? And here we are.
Yeah, it's like a comeback encore episode.
Right. You know, like we waited in the wings and people applauded and we were so shocked by that we came back out.
Yeah, except nobody asked for this, but here we are anyway.
That's right.
And you're going to listen and you're going to like it.
The podcast nobody asked for.
Exactly.
The Open Apple version of the Blues Brothers.
Yeah.
We're getting the band back together.
Hey, Quinn, you've been on some other podcasts since we last spoke, right?
I have. I got sucked into the RCR vortex.
Oh, no.
I swore I was never going to podcast again. No, that didn't happen. But somehow I got sucked into co-hosting RCR occasionally. And so I've been doing lots of that. Lots of. The nice thing about the RCR format is that it's very loose. So we have a large pool of hosts. And so people step in and out when they're available. And we don't record that often, which is kind of what makes it sustainable. So that works for all of us. So yeah, been doing that.
Nice. And you say you got sucked into Retro Computing Roundtable, but that verb does not describe the experience.
No, I stumbled into. I'm not sure. Honestly, I don't remember how I got drawn into the RCR vortex, but it happened. And I have no regrets.
I guess that's all we can hope for, right? We did something and we don't regret it.
Yeah, exactly. A bunch of stuff happened and I'm still here. So.
That's right.
It was a good life.
Which I'm sure is the heartwarming story that Paul Hegstrom wants to know about my RCR experience. I don't know. It's a thing that happened.
We can edit this in post, make it sound great.
Yeah, exactly.
And what about you, Em? What have you been up to?
Nothing at all.
Yeah.
No.
You still a retro computing fan?
I am. I had to step away for a little while for some health purposes and just had to figure out priorities and what I needed to focus on. And for a while, it was not retro computing. And I came back and everything's different now.
Everything?
Well, not everything.
I mean, the Apple II still came out in 1977 and is an 8-bit machine run by the MOS 6502.
That's true. Your beard is a little bit grayer.
Thank you. Yeah. We're not the teenagers we were when we last did this show.
I said a little bit.
It's surprising how much the community has changed. Honestly, a lot has happened. The platform may be static, but the people sure move around a lot.
My goodness, yes.
Yeah. Anything specific you want to call out?
I mean, there's new conferences. Old conferences are changing. New projects all the time. I mean, in our news items here, we've got contributions from new folks that haven't put out stuff before. So. Honestly, I mean, the community continues to evolve and change, and I think mostly in positive ways. So, yeah. Yeah,
it's always unfortunate when somebody has to move on from the community, whether that is they have a new hobby or a new interest, which happens, or they get burnt out, or they pass away and hopefully bequeath their estate to the community. You know, I've been going to KansasFest, to name one staple of this community, since 1998. And the people who show up there are some people who are still the same. I still see Margaret Anderson and Kirk Mitchell and a bunch of other folks. And then there are people who came for a while and haven't been, unfortunately, for a while, like the two of you. I'd love to see you two at an Apple II conference again someday. And then every year there are new people showing up to these events and listening to podcasts and publishing software, which is awesome because this community is vibrant and depends on newcomers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially, I mean, as the official Apple II podcast of record, we should, of course, acknowledge the passing of Tony Diaz, who was, it's been a while since we recorded, so it's not exactly news. But he was certainly an influential and very present guy in the community and had probably the most impressive collection of priceless Apple II artifacts anywhere, in the world. He had prototypes of 3.5-inch Duo drives, and he had the Mark Twain 2GS and schematics from original, Apple Skunkworks projects and just crazy stuff like that. Some of which we are not currently sure the whereabouts of. But the community will certainly be worse without him. That's for sure.
Yep.
And I think you and I, Ken, recorded a Farewell Tony episode a while back.
Yeah, in fact, even though this is the first so-called episode of Open Apple in a long time, there have actually been 9 audio files released on this feed in the last 8 years or so. Most of them are audio from other conferences like KansasFest or the Portland Retro Gaming Expo. One of them was a lost episode, which just aired earlier this month, with featuring John Keone Moore, something that YouTube recorded years ago. And there was also an episode that you and I reunited for back in 2021 to remember Tony Diaz. So this is what you're hearing right now is the first episode that is not repurposed audio, lost audio, or talking exclusively about dead people.
That's a high bar.
Yeah, I mean, that should be our new slogan, right?
Yeah,
Indeed.
We're not talking about dead people.
We talk about people who are alive.
Yeah, I must have missed that. I'm still subscribed to the feed, but I must have missed your Tony Diaz episode. So it's not even news for this feed. How about that?
Well, we'll include a link to it in the show notes at open-apple.net in case people want to find it.
Excellent.
I've been in the Apple II community, doing my thing, still doing Juice.js. That hasn't changed. I think since we last spoke, I launched a new podcast called Transporter Lock, which is all about Star Trek. It was co-hosted for 7 years with my good friend Sabriel Maston, and just like how we were talking about with the Apple II community, people get new hobbies and interests, and they move on. So Sabriel is still a wonderful friend and a still vibrant member of the Star Trek community. But I've continued the Star Trek podcast with other co-hosts, just like M did with Open Apple after I left that show. So that's what I've been up to. Oh, and a2central.com is a website that Tony, speaking of which, ran for many years. It went offline when he did. And I was able to resurrect it 2 years ago, March 31st of 2023. And still with all 20 years of content. So this is like news, mostly news, some features from people that we haven't heard from in a long time. And yeah, there's still a little bit of old content I'm trying to find from the Wayback Machine and put back on the site, more for historical purposes than actual functional things, because like how you connect an Apple II computer to a modern computer, you can still do it the way we did it 25 years ago, but there are a lot of other options now too. So I don't know that wants to be the canonical way you reference how to do these things, but it's still nice to have like, oh, here's a link from 25 years ago, and it still works. It still points to the content that was there that many years ago.
Yeah, that was a great service to the community that you resurrected that because, if nothing else for Googleability, a lot of times when I used to search Apple II stuff, it would land me on A2 Central because that's, a lot of the content these days is on walled gardens. It's in Discord and Slack and so on. And of course, none of that is searchable. So it's tremendously valuable to have that stuff still on the web.
Well, thank you. Well, huge shout out to Eric Shepard, who made it possible. He launched A2 Central in the first place. It was his idea back in the year 2000. And without his help, it would not be back online now. So we have all those historical archives. And every now and then I put up some new stuff. It's always a juggling act to try to figure out what I should put in Juice.js versus what I should put on A2 Central.
Right.
And one obvious factor is, does it have an embeddable YouTube video? If so, I'm not going to put that in print.
Yeah, links in print still don't work so well.
I do put hyperlinks in Juice.js, and you can go to the Juice.js website, and there's a list of all the links in the magazine, so you don't have to type them in. But if there's multimedia that really is invaluable to the content and the context, then I'll put that online.
Yeah, it's that was a funny thing about the 90s is magazines never figured out what to do with URLs. They would put them in print, but then often they're just generated strings of gibberish. They're 50 characters long and nobody's going to type those in. So what do you do?
Right.
Oh, I don't know. There was the oh so successful QCat. Remember
that? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, some magazines I've seen are doing QR codes for URLs, which now that seems like a good approach since our phones all do that automatically now. You just point the phone at it, but it's a tricky problem for dead trees.
Yeah, QR codes used to be a joke. There's a blog spot, I think it's called Photos of People Scanning QR Codes .blogspot.com. And when you go, it just says no post found.
Aw.
Because that's the way it used to be. But now QR
Yeah,
codes are pretty ubiquitous.
they are.
I haven't used them in Juice.js just because they take up a bit more space.
They do, yeah.
But I do have an Apple II specific URL shortener. It's kind of like Bitly, except it has the benefit of not being Bitly.
Yeah.
So that way you don't have to type in 50 random characters. It's like it actually makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And your URL isn't tied to a, sketchy government that could go away at any moment, as we've learned some of the other URL shorteners have suddenly disappeared.
Right. Yeah, I actually gave a very flash talk at KansasFest one year about like, here's why not to use Bitly.
That's right. Yeah, that's why that was in my head. Yeah, your flash talk.
Yeah, .ly is Libya.
Yeah. Yeah.
And somebody after that talk pointed out to me, they're like, Ken, that URL shortener that you're using is still tied to something that could go away, which is you. And I was like, well, that's true, but I have a really good, I don't know what you call it, directives for what happens to me if I become unavailable. And all my online assets fall to somebody else, all the passwords, all the accounts. So nothing will ever be locked away just because I can't access it.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's always going to be a point of failure on such a thing, whether it's a person or a corporation or a corrupt foreign government. So pick your poison. I'd rather have it in your hands than any of those other options. So.
Are you saying I'm not a corrupt foreign government?
Not as far as I know. I mean, you seem pretty chill.
We're not saying that, Ken.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. I mean, I don't know.
I contain multitudes.
Yeah, clearly.
Hey. All right. Well, on that note, shall we dive into the news?
Yeah, let's.
Get what's new and exciting in retro computing with 2 News.
So we now have about 8 years worth of Apple II news to catch up on.
It's a lot. A lot has happened.
I hear that we're coming up on the 40th anniversary of the Apple II. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, why don't we focus on some things that have happened in the last few months? Anybody want to start?
Yeah, well, why don't we start with the conferences? I mean, that's the biggest news is the conference of record, I suppose, for the Apple II community has always been KansasFest. And this year, KansasFest has gone virtual. So there was some attempt at change of venue, and that was reversed. So now it's going to be a virtual only conference, similar to how it was run during COVID.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to that. I, as a digital nomad, have to plan my travels around where and when I want to be. It's not just a matter of getting on a plane, going somewhere for a week, and then coming back, because I don't really have any somewhere to come back to. Organizing my summer around a trip to Wichita was challenging, not just logistically, but also I wasn't sure it was something I wanted to do, even though I love going to KansasFest.
Mm-hmm.
So when they announced it was virtual, I was like, well, that eliminates a lot of variables for me. Yeah. And I am sad to not see my fellow Apple II hobbyists this summer in person at KansasFest. But there's an alternative this year.
There is a new conference has been announced called INIT HELLO, and it's put on by some former K-Festers, and I think it's going to be in Maryland. Is that right?
That is correct. Hunt Valley, Maryland, about an hour north of Baltimore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty exciting. News is just starting to come out as we record this, but you want to talk about the very exciting keynote speaker that they have lined up?
Yeah, in fact, I think it's somebody that the two of you interviewed. Em, do you want to mention this?
Yeah, it's Lane Mooney who Quinn and I interviewed a while ago, and they came on our show to talk about Sierra Online, doing a whole bunch of writing about their history and their games, and I remember that episode being a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. Honestly, I remember Lane as the printer stand person because we had this really long conversation about the domestic and cultural importance of printer stands, basically how and these Apple IIs came into everybody's homes and we didn't know where to put them. Like literally Western homes are designed around a certain domestic structure and computers didn't fit into that. You know, we have a kitchen where your major appliances go and we have a room where your television goes and we have a room where your car goes, but we don't have a room where the computer goes. So nobody knew where to put it. Does it go next to the TV? Is it entertainment? Does it go in the kitchen? Is it a productivity tool? People didn't have home offices really in those days. Does it go in the den? So, yeah, there was a whole kind of cultural shift around figuring out domestically what to do with these things, and we didn't have furniture for them. So it was literally a big deal to invent new kinds of desks and stands to put your printer on, and that sort of thing. So I just thought that was a really interesting angle on computing that we don't really hear from, within the community. We talk a lot about the technical details of the machines, but we don't think about their effect on life and domestic life in particular. So Lane is great for that. And of course, Lane recently put out a book called The Apple II Age, which is all about the different categories of software, not so much this program or that program, but about the program, how software developed into making computers useful. Something that we've talked a lot about on this show and also on our CR. Of course, when computers came out, and the enthusiasts, we all loved them. We thought they were great for their own sake. We just liked playing with them, but the normies were all like, well, everything this does is worse than the way I used to do it. Like, it's worse than my paper calendar. It's worse than my recipe box. It's worse than reading the newspaper. So yeah, it took a while for the software to actually come up with ways to do things that were better than the analog world was doing them. And Lane's book is all about that journey.
And I sometimes wonder if we're still on that journey, because sometimes I do things on the computer. I was like, why is this so difficult? And I spend
Yeah.
more time implementing a solution than I would solving it any other way.
Yeah, my brother-in-law has gone back to a paper calendar slash agenda planner thing. He's a marketing executive, and he doesn't like doing his calendar, his appointments and such on the computer. It's just more cumbersome to him, and I get it. I feel that way sometimes.
I also remember, as part of that discussion, a weird sort of branch off down a rabbit hole of like Apple II printer acoustics, because these dot matrix printers were loud,
Yes.
and you couldn't
Yes.
just like set them next to the family television when everybody's watching Knight Rider. It's or like I remember trying to print out. Computers had this program that would like print out the entire map of Britannia and Ultima 4, and it was like panels that you would you take it apart and then tape it all together. It was huge, but like this thing would just chew through paper and ink, and it was so loud, and it took forever to print anything out. So you couldn't just stick it in your bedroom or a place where it was going to disturb people at 2 a.m. Not that I would have ever done anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. My parents wouldn't let me print when they were home because it was so loud. During that period, my computer was in my bedroom, so I would start the printer, close the door, and go downstairs, but it was still too loud. It's
an interesting bell curve that the Apple II and personal computers have journeyed, where they start off, as you were saying, Quinn, things were worse using the computer, and then they eventually got better. And then if you stick with that computer, it eventually gets worse again.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of my father using the Apple II to run the family business, which was revolutionary, to do all his accounting in AppleWorks, which was great. But then after 20 years of still using AppleWorks, his accountant would say, "Can you email me your financials?" And my dad would say, "Nope."
Yeah.
And he would print it out on the dot matrix, tape it together, and bring it to his accountant and be like, "Here are my financials."
Yeah.
And the guy's like, "You got to stop doing this."
Yeah, that was an early lesson in proprietary file formats. My dad was a veterinarian, and he had the same experience where he computerized his business during the XT DOS era with this proprietary veterinary clinic software. And it was all proprietary binary file formats. And then the computers got too old and they couldn't migrate it. It was just this one company's proprietary thing, and the company didn't exist anymore, and they were just stuck. So he actually had to hire a data entry company to print out 10 years of records and retype them into the newer software. That was the only way to migrate the data. It was horrible. So those problems still exist sometimes.
I was just going to say, thank goodness we learned from that, and everything is open source now.
Yeah, exactly. Everything's XML, right? Right?
As it should be.
Crickets, yeah.
Every now and then there's not something that I'm learning for the first time, but something I'm learning for the second time. Like, I knew it and I forgot it, and now I'm remembering it. And that is that Lane Nooney was the Sierra Online person. Because like when they first started tweeting back in 2012, I was like, oh, like their name is Sierra Offline. They're writing all this Sierra stuff, and this is really cool. And now I'm remembering, oh yeah, this is also the person who wrote the Apple II book.
Yeah.
That's just a wonderful breadth and depth of knowledge from one
Mhm.
person.
It really is, yeah. And I really have always loved I hesitate to use the term outsider for Lane because I mean I don't want to sound gatekeepy, but Lane is kind of like not in the technical side of the community, like not this little insular bubble that we all are living in, playing Choplifter and whatever. But that's what's so great about what Lane writes is that it's all from a completely different perspective that we don't get from within the community. And the Sierra Online stuff was another example of that. Lane's early work was all about the cultural impact of Sierra Online and the structure of the company and how those early computing companies were different than traditional companies. And it wasn't just about, well, here's how they wrote Mystery House or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, pure factual recounting has its value, and I think
Hmm.
a lot of that can be found in Steve Wyrick's book. But
Yep.
somebody who actually analyzes and interprets the facts into something and synthesizes it into something new is
Yeah.
equally valuable in a different way. And I really love that Lane did that with their book.
Yeah.
And you're right about the perspective, which is a lot of what we say and do about the Apple II, we say it because it personally impacted us.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we love the Apple II because it was part of my childhood. I hate John Scully because he killed the Apple II, which was my favorite computer.
Yeah.
And Lane can just be like, well, let's look at the facts and what we can infer from that.
Yeah, and Lane writes very much about the cultural impact of this stuff, which we tend to not have good, we tend to have blinders about that because we were the culture. But think about our parents or the kids at school who weren't into computers at that age that we were. For them, this was all a weird alien other thing. And they all got sucked into it over time. And Lane really examines what that looked like. How did our little weird subculture become normal? So yeah, when you're inside, you can't see the forest for the trees so we're not well equipped to talk about the cultural impact of this stuff.
I think I'm insulted. You just called us normal?
Well, we became normal. We changed what normal is, I think.
There we go.
And that's why every movie is a superhero movie now, because nerds are cool.
Right. It's not that we became normal, it's that normal became us.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Haha.
Haha. The
Yes.
nerds won.
Did we?
Yeah, yeah.
Eh. So Lane is going to be at INIT Hello, which is at the end of July. The website is init-hello.org. And actually, you two are like the first people I've spoken to verbally about this conference. Is it INIT Hello or is it INIT Hello?
Ooh, controversial. Uh, I would say init hello because that's how I always said it in my head. For people who may not get it or aren't necessarily Apple II zealots, it's a reference to how you formatted a disk in DOS 3.3. So it has connotations of new beginnings and exciting newness in general. But yeah, so it's just all caps init space hello or init hello. I don't know. It never even occurred to me that there's more than one way to pronounce it because my way is obviously the correct way.
If that's what the phrase means, then is it possible for next year for there to be an INIT Hello 2? Wouldn't we just have to restart it every year?
I think you would write that as in a hello, comma D2
Yeah, there you go.
for the second run.
That's
Yeah,
right. That's right. Eventually, we're just going to run out of slots.
yeah, and then then the next one's called catalog because it's sort of a retro. It's a introspection. Let's look back on what we've done.
Yeah.
Oops.
So it's just all going to be DOS commands. We'll have to register a new domain name every year
Yep. Oh yeah, this metaphor has some legs.
and some expenses.
Yes, exactly.
Oh gosh. Every year is the inaugural something conference.
Yeah, yeah, and then if the community fractures and we have to restart it, then it's PR number 6.
Great.
See, these conferences name themselves. I can do this all day.
And we'll have to get a printer stand for
Yeah,
is it peer number one?
exactly.
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's the really loud conference.
Moving on, Em, I see you put something on here about a WAS speech. Speaking of keynote speakers.
Oh yeah, he gave it was a live YouTube feed a couple of weeks ago from MWC, which, as I recall, is Mobile Wireless Conference in Barcelona. And they recorded it now. You can rewatch it. Most of it's just him rehashing the stuff that we already know from his early years and why he chose to do the things that he did. And one of the reporters kept trying to push him to talk about Apple and the current political environment, and certain unpleasant names came up, and you could see him trying to avoid like getting into it. But I think overall it was good to hear that and see him again.
Yeah, I've been wondering how he's been doing ever since he had like a micro stroke in Mexico a year or two ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's old. That's how he's doing.
Yeah.
I think he's 75 this year in August.
You're absolutely correct. August 11th, he turned 75.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, we're lucky in the Apple II community. Our kind of spokesperson has always been a good egg. He's such a good guy, and he seems to mostly come down on the right sides of things, which is nice. We don't have to wrestle with controversial leaders like maybe Commodore does. Some of the other groups have questionable figures at the top. I mean, Steve Jobs was certainly no angel. So, but he's dead. So, and we don't talk
That's
about
right.
dead people on this show, as we've established. So,
He had the good sense to shuffle off this mortal coil a long time ago.
exactly, and we got the good one.
The Steve Jobs movies were largely inaccurate, but some of them were still quite entertaining.
Yeah.
And one of them, I think maybe the one with Michael Fassbender, there was a scene between him and Steve Wozniak, the actor or the character, whatever. And Jobs was saying, I'd rather be a genius than a nice guy or something like that. And Woz said, it's not binary. It's not either or.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
You
that seems like something the real Woz would say. I was like, yes, exactly. He is both.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah. Being nice is not a high bar. I feel like some folks have struggle to remember that. It's not that. There's no dichotomy required because you can just do both. You can just be nice and be whatever else you also are.
It is a choice. You have to choose to be nice.
Yeah.
And in fact, Woz actually took some shots at the Ashton Kutcher movie in that speech about like, unlike how it was portrayed in that movie, here's what really happened.
Yeah, I tend to tell people that the Michael Fassbender one was the least accurate and the most entertaining.
Right.
Like I thought Ashton Kutcher, of the three Jobs movies I saw, Ashton Kutcher physically embodied Steve Jobs better than any of the other actors. Like Michael Fassbender did not remind me of Steve Jobs, but it was a better movie.
There were 3 Steve Jobs movies. I don't think I knew there were 3.
Well, one was Pirates of the.
Okay. Oh, Pirates of the Silicon Valley. Yeah.
Yeah, and Noah Wyle, I still think is the best Steve Jobs physically.
Well, especially when he played him at Macworld.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the third movie. I might have to like come back and edit this part of the podcast because it might have been like a biopic or not. I'm not a biopic. The other ones were biopics. It might have been like a documentary or a recreation. No. I have a clear vision of the movie poster.
I haven't seen any of the Jobs movies, so they're all sort of a blur of trailers that are all intermingled in my brain.
And there were a bunch of documentaries that came out right after he died too, and some of them were very cinematic in their construction.
Yeah. Yeah, there was probably a bunch of straight to cable, whatever documentaries
Totally.
that disappeared, never to be seen again.
About the same level of quality as those, the unauthorized biography, where it's just like 90% conjecture.
Yeah. It's got to be tough for someone like Woz, who's famous primarily because of his association with this other guy who's sort of a monster, and so everybody wants to talk about him, and thus all of these dramatizations get made about adjacent to your life that are mostly wrong, and now everyone thinks wrong things about you. Like that's got to be sort of tough.
Well, Woz even talked specifically about as Apple grew and became this other thing, he was very content and kind of had to put his foot down about like, I am here as an engineer. This is what I want to do. I don't want anything to do with running this company. Yeah. And they still assume now that he was part of that. And he has to no, I didn't do that. That was the other one.
Yeah. And he was gone for a long time. People always forget that he left Apple for a long time. He had his remote control company and he had his music festivals. And as soon as Apple started to turn into something he didn't like, he left and he was basically gone after that. So he was actually not there that long. But of
course, the plane crash kind of messed with his memory.
Yeah, exactly.
Made things a lot harder to be an engineer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, he's pretty much been doing non-computer Apple things for most of his life at this point. But
other than talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. He's sort of the Apple II mascot now, but he hasn't really been officially attached to the company since the early 80s.
Isn't he still on the payroll?
Yeah, he's still on the payroll. He gets like $1 a month or something like that. And he says that somewhere in one of the buildings there's an office with a plaque with my name on the door. So
Oh, that's funny. I didn't know he still had an office. That's actually pretty
Yep.
great.
Yep.
Has he actually been to this office, or is he just reporting what he's been told?
He said he'd been there once or twice, or like he'd been to the building to visit somebody else and like walked past and, oh, there's my name.
Amazing.
That's pretty funny.
So the Michael Fassbender movie came out in 2013. In 2015, I think this is the movie I was thinking of. It's called Steve Jobs, The Man in the Machine. It is a documentary, so there's no actor playing him. But I did, in the course of looking this up just now, find that there was another movie that came out in 2013 called I, Steve, and it features Justin Long playing Steve Jobs.
Oh yeah, I do remember that. Yes,
I remember
that's
hearing
right.
about that.
Justin Long. Justin Long's is a pretty good resemblance for Steve Jobs, actually, the young Steve Jobs. Yeah.
And this is the first feature-length film from Funny or Die.
Of
Oh
course.
wow. Okay. That's
Well,
yeah.
and Justin Long did those I'm a Mac on a PC
He
commercials
did.
way
Yeah,
back when
that's a funny synergy. Yeah. He
with
was
Hodgman,
yeah, he was the Mac.
And of course, the movie Idiocracy.
Oh yeah,
Dodgeball,
Die Hard 4, I think he was
Mystery
in.
Men.
Mystery
probably.
Men, he was in that?
He had a brief cameo in that.
I didn't
Yeah, I
remember
forget
that.
the part that he played. Yeah,
Huh.
Are we just listing Justin Long's filmography now?
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I have a theory that every podcast devolves into reading Wikipedia at some point.
I didn't even have Wikipedia pulled up.
Yes.
These are the movies I've seen.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about some games. You have something on here called Chronologically Gaming?
Yeah, this is it's a YouTube. I don't know if you call those podcasts because they're video or vodcast or something, but so they're going through and the conceit of this thing is that they're playing every video game that's ever been made in order, which I don't know how you do that, but there's a lot of really good Apple II episodes, that are focused on Apple II software and games. And there's a recent one with, I'm drawing a blank on his name, Howard something from Atari.
Howard Scott Warshaw.
Yeah, who guested when they were playing one of these Atari games. And it was the way they do it is kind of like, okay, once we get through the little intro or whatever, we're going to pretend that this is now like 1982 and nothing else has come out. So
Okay.
it's the earlier episodes are like 10 or 15 minutes. And I think as they've gotten more comfortable with the format, it's kind of slowly expanded. They're about an hour long right now. But I don't know. I have a lot of fun just kind of watching them sort of play through these games because the person that's doing this is not somebody that I recognize from the community. So watching again that outsider perspective of like watching him discover stuff that like I'd either forgotten about or like to me just like seemed obvious because I grew up doing these things. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, that's nice. That sounds like a great show, honestly. Yeah, there, especially if it's sort of positive in nature. Like there are some YouTube channels where they go and play old games, and mostly it's just like they're laughing at how terrible they are and stuff. But it's like that's not really fair, So,
well, they do point out that like it is kind of some of the games. It's like you bring the box home from Egghead and it looks like a great game, and you put it in, and they're like, oh, what is this? And so there is kind of like this acknowledgement that maybe this wasn't a great game. But it's not like this. Let's make fun of the entire gaming culture from back then because a couple of titles are, low res, 16 color graphics, or 8 color, I guess.
Yeah, it was hard to buy games in those days. I'm sure all of us spent $50 on some turkey that had the Commodore 64 screenshots on the back, and you thought it was going to be great, and it was just trash. And
great cover art, yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, honestly, it's part of why I never felt too bad about pirating. I think a lot of us probably felt this way because it was just such a high risk. Like you save your allowance for 4 months to buy something, you have no idea if it's any good, and then it turns out to be terrible. Because kind of like today, I mean, a lot of games were made, and probably 10% of them were genuinely very, very good. So
that's right.
Yeah.
These companies owe us.
Yeah, that's right. Gosh darn it, I'm owed entertainment.
That's right.
Entertain me. Yeah.
Did you say they're playing every video game ever made?
Well, that's the conceit. I haven't watched every one of these because some of them are just frankly platforms that I'm not really interested in. There's the Vectrex and stuff like that, which like, okay, that looks like an interesting box, but I don't care about like whatever they're going to play. But yeah, the conceit is we're playing every game ever made in the order it was released.
that'll work up to about 1979, I think, and then it's
Right.
going to get real hard, real
Right.
fast
Yeah.
to A,
Yeah.
play everything, B, figure out what order they were made in.
We will all be long dead by the time they reach the end of that journey.
Yeah.
Well, even Moby Games, they list 298,082 games. And according to some Google searches, that's not a comprehensive list of every game ever made. The comprehensive list would be closer to like 5 million, depending on which Google result you're looking at.
Totally.
So that's a lot of podcast episodes.
Yes, it is. Well, and if you're considering all platforms, even arcade and console and everything, I mean, there was probably 50 games a year coming out by, 83, 84. So, yeah, I guess good luck playing all those.
Well, I mean, look at it this way. You never have to like worry about what is our next episode going to be about. Because there's
Yeah,
always more games.
that there is.
But imagine like, oh, I want to recommend this podcast to you, but I really recommend you go back to the first episode and listen to the first 200,000.
Yeah.
Then it gets really good.
It'd take you about 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, they really hit their stride on episode 150,000, somewhere in
Right.
there.
Yeah. But with all the callbacks, you can't just skip the earlier episodes.
Yeah,
That's
no,
right.
exactly.
Yeah.
You're just missing out all the Easter eggs.
There are a couple of new Apple II games that I want to shout out. One is called Glider, and this is based on a Mac game that has been ported or originally developed from the ground up for the Apple II now by Colin Leroy Mira. It looks really cool in monochrome. It supports color, but some people, and I think I'm one of them, would say that it looks better in black and green. And you're basically controlling a paper airplane as it goes from the left side of the screen to the right side. And the way it stays adrift is from air vents in the ground that, give it updraft and lift. So you're trying to avoid various obstacles in the room. Each room is just a single screen, and you're trying to collect various items as you navigate and try not to crash into things like tables and chairs. It has, I think, like 7 or 8 levels, if I recall, and each level might be a couple of different rooms, if I recall. You can play it in English or Bulgarian, which is kind of neat. And it supports anything from the Apple II Plus and up.
Oh, I was just going to say I was excited to see this on the news item list because I'm pretty excited about this. The port is fantastic. Like Glider is such a classic Mac game. I mean, anybody who had a Mac in the black and white era had played this game for sure. And I mean, there were 10 games, so of course you played them all. But Glider was very, very good. And this port of it is really terrific. It's got the whimsy and the charm of the original. The animation is great. And Colin says on the site that this was his first attempt to write an Apple II game. So bravo, slow clap, nailed it in one. Because it's pretty terrific for someone who's never written an Apple II game before. The Apple II is not an easy platform to write games for. So to come out of the gate with this, pretty fantastic.
And he's written lots of other Apple II software. This is just his first game.
Okay. So that helps. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. For example, he wrote the Mastodon client for the Apple II.
Okay. Yeah. The name was familiar. I couldn't place him, but okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
And also shout out to John Calhoun, who wrote the original Mac version, which I never played. My first Mac was in 97. So I missed all the early Mac stuff. And at that point, by 97, I had a PlayStation and a Nintendo 64. So I wasn't really playing games on the computer. And also, were there Mac games in the late 90s?
Not really.
All the Dark Castle fans just flipped their tables.
Yeah,
okay,
they're coming for us.
That's fair. My regrets and apologies.
I have a good friend who he teaches kids at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science about aerodynamics, and he does it with paper airplanes, and he's like won national contests and awards for like keeping it afloat for an hour or two, stuff like that. And but he has related to me in the past that Glider on a Mac was kind of what got him into that and into his job and into his career to begin with. So I'm sure that he will find this very amusing.
That's a story. I wonder how his parents felt when he said he was going to study paper airplanes for a living. He sure showed them.
I think he wanted to be like a rocket scientist or an aerodynamic engineer.
I love it.
But do it with paper airplanes.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have that one piece of software, or many people do, that just like flips a switch in their head and be like, this is what I want to do. And sometimes it's more broadly, I want to make computer games like this. In their case, it was, I want to make paper airplanes like this.
Exactly.
Mine was more kind of like what Quinn was talking about, where like this software sucks. I want my money back. I'm going to get into pirating.
Yeah.
And then they became professional pirates.
Indeed.
Yeah.
R.
R.
It's one step from locksmith to buying a parrot.
Right.
Indeed.
I mean, would you download that parrot?
Exactly. No.
Glider is also now one of the disk images that is available preloaded through Apple IITS, which is Chris Torrance's web-based Apple II emulator written entirely in TypeScript. So when you go to apple2ts.com, and that's the number 2, you can just choose Glider from any one of several disks to boot up. But that is almost a convenience now instead of a necessity, because Chris and Lawrence Sanchez, who's also been contributing to the project, have enabled the ability to just load disk images from the Internet Archive. So you can just pull up an Internet Archive browser right in Apple IITS, type in the game you want, it'll find it, and it'll boot that. So you're no longer limited to just whatever they preload.
Yeah, Apple IITS is very exciting. It's a really fresh take on Apple II emulation. And I think we should shout out Nox Archaist here as well, because one of the things that a web-based emulator does is it empowers whole new categories of tooling for game development that we couldn't have done before. So Nox Archaist 2 is in production as we speak, and they're using very much browser-based tooling for map editing and sprite building and all that kind of stuff. And they've incorporated Apple IITS as part of their toolchain, so they can edit sprites while Nox Archaeus 2 is running in an Apple IITS window right next to it in real time, and it's all integrated. It's really, really slick. So yeah, that's an amazing collaboration that's happening there. I love to see this modern take on things that we would have done different ways even 5 years ago.
About a year ago, Ken actually approached me to write a review of the Juice.js, or the KansasFest virtual sessions. And I don't think the article didn't get published because I was not happy with how it went. But one of the sessions was for Chris's Apple IITS, and I remember at the time thinking, like, do we like? I don't. Why do we need another Apple II emulator? And then it occurred to me that that's sort of like when people who are not wrestling fans ask, like, or say something like, oh, it's all fake, right? Well, that's you totally missed the point. And
Yeah.
asking the question, like, why we need this emulator is just missing the point entirely, because it's an emulator and it's cool and that's it.
Yeah, that's I confess to some of that as well. I mean, Chris is my friend. I adore everything he does. I think he's delightful, and it's a really nice emulator. And I was like, yeah, that's sweet.
Yeah.
Nice job, dude. But then I saw Mark's presentation on Nox Archaeus 2 and how they had integrated it into their tooling, and then my mind just exploded. I was like, oh,
Exactly.
now I get it. Now
I get it. The light comes on.
Yeah, and in fact, I think that was the origin of Apple IITS, was that Mark and Chris had been talking, and they were, Mark was like, "Hey, I'd really love a way to visualize, the gameplay in real time in our tooling, and can you write an emulator in TypeScript?" And Chris was like, "Hold my beer," and here we are.
Right.
Also, I think nowadays writing an Apple II emulator is the cost of admission to the community.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there have been, we don't want to miss anyone, but there have been a lot of new emulators in the past 10 years, and many of them are excellent. So
if you haven't released your own branch of AppleWin, you're just really not an Apple II fan.
Yeah, or kegs. Don't forget keg.
Exactly. Got to have a kegs port to be in our community.
Every December, Ivan Drucker does a roundup of Apple II emulators for Juice.js, focusing on what is new or improved in the past 12 months. And even when you take that constraint into account, just the past 12 months, and he has other criteria, like it has to support at least this model of Apple II, et cetera, it's still an exhaustive list that he has to go through, because there's just so much happening in the emulation scene all the time. In fact, we're planning on putting the December article that he just wrote 4 months ago online for free, so that everybody can have this comprehensive index of, you want to emulate the Apple II? Here's, like, depending on what model you want to emulate and what OS you're running, here's what we recommend.
Nice.
Yeah. One other game I want to shout out is called Plang Man, and this actually came out 9 years ago. It's by Aaron Von Lee, and I interviewed him on another podcast I used to host, which no longer exists except in back episodes, called IndieCider. I interviewed him back in March of 2016, so 9 years ago last month, and he calls this an Apple II inspired puzzle platformer. So it's very monochromatic. The main character looks like the guy from Olympic Decathlon. And you're basically, it's a platform game. So you're running around, jumping from level to level, but all the levels that you're jumping between are built from blocks that have letters in them, and you're trying to spell words. So it's kind of like Hangman, but as a platformer, hence Plangman.
Oh, fun.
And as you're spelling these words, it actually does produce a narrative that tells a story as you continue through the game. There are now, I think since I interviewed him 9 years ago, like a deluxe edition with 100 extra levels. There is a level editor, so you can make your own. What's the reason I'm bringing this up now, even though the game came out 9 years ago on itch.io, where you can download it for free, is that it's now also available on Steam. On Steam, it is also free with the soundtrack available for $4. The developer hints that that zip file has some additional files besides just the soundtrack. But if you are somebody who exists solely in the Steam ecosystem and that's where you want all your games to be, you can now get Plangman on Steam.
That's awesome. I hadn't seen that one. Thanks for sharing that. I like these like Apple II inspired modern games because it's sort of like looking back at the platform with rose-colored glasses. Like you get the aesthetic, the green and black and the little, low res running man and so on, but without all of the annoyances, the color fringing and the load times and all the rest. So yeah, it's a nice way to remember the good parts. Sort of like when a messy relative dies and you can just remember the good parts of them and not so much the stuff they used to post on Facebook that you wish they didn't.
But we don't talk about dead people, so
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So.
One neat thing about Plangman, and this, I don't know how relevant this is or if anybody will even notice, but it's not just like Aaron saw an Apple II on the internet and said, oh, that's really inspiring, and made a game that looks like it. He's somebody who grew up with the Apple II just like us. And in fact, just this past week, he emailed me and said, hey, Ken, can you help me image this floppy that I have? So this is not like, I know there are a lot of kids who were born well after the Apple II and like, oh, my grandparents used to use this. That's so retro. Look what I can do. And that's still valid because it's reinvigorating and revitalizing the aesthetic of the Apple II. But I think there's also value in somebody who intimately knows the Apple II and is reimagining it the way they wish it was or the way they remember it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to remember that like there's a core of our community that is very intense about this platform, and we're all on the Slack and the Discord and go to KFest and now INIT HELLO and whatever. But we are like 5% of the number of kids who grew up with this machine and have fond memories of it. I mean, they made tens of millions of these machines, and they were all out there influencing kids when we were playing with them on the playground. So, or when we were inside playing with them and the cool kids were on the playground. But yeah, so that influence exists to this day. And that's why every so often you see a quote unquote outsider come in out of nowhere with some new game or whatever, some new disassembly. And this isn't a name that you know. It's not someone that you met at KFest or whatever. But those people are all out there and they make stuff too.
Yeah. I mean, I love going to KansasFest. I love the people who go to KansasFest, but it's also important to remember that KansasFest is not representative of the community.
Yeah.
I mean, that can be said of any demographic, like the people who read Juice GS or the people who listen to Open Apple. Again, just a fraction. Like you go in the Apple II enthusiast group on Facebook, how many people are in there now? Like 20,000?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. It's, and of those, a very small number post, there's a very silent majority in any enthusiast group that just is there and they like to look, but they aren't necessarily posting or getting into the arguments about the minutia of the platform or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's always a vocal minority that gets all the attention, and
Yeah.
the whole community is much larger.
Well, for a lot of people, and this is true of modern gaming as well, their relationship with their games is they go to GameStop, they bring it home, and they play it. And that's it. And they don't engage in gaming media. That's why, for example, the demographics of who plays video games versus the demographics of who watches my YouTube channel are dramatically different. Yeah, you would not know that it was anything other than men playing video games if you were just to go by who watches my YouTube channel.
Yeah, for sure.
I think there's also something to the idea of, people who are content or happy with the product aren't going to say anything because it works great. It's only the ones who have a problem that are complaining and making noise about stuff. So there's a lot of people out there who are happy with the community and don't necessarily it's great. I don't need to dive in.
Yeah. Yeah. And most people don't get as invested in hobbies as some of us do. And some of them, like
What?
most kids had an Apple II because their parents bought one because their school told them to buy one, and they played Olympic decathlon 5 times and they were like, neat, and then got on with their lives and went on to do other things. So yeah, but now those people are grown-ups and they are making stuff and they remember, oh yeah, we had an Apple II. That thing was neat. I want to make a game that looks like that.
Mhm. And then there are the people who, when they say they grew up with Apple II, and you ask them, "Do you still have it?" And they're like, "No, why would I?"
Right.
Yeah. It's
Of course not. What's
garbage.
wrong with you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So someone in our community recently described retro computing as playing with e-waste, which I laughed. That's my favorite way to describe this hobby. Because I mean, it's tongue in cheek, but of course it does give you some perspective too. Like that is literally kind of what we're doing.
Right. We certainly don't want to disparage our hobby or the hardware, but from
Yeah.
a certain point of view, that statement is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's not all get too serious about this because we're
No,
playing with e-waste.
you're talking to the people who are co-hosting a podcast with you
Fair.
that we should not get serious about this.
Fair. If look, this glass house is lovely, and I will throw whatever I want in it.
Help yourself. I'll be there helping you. Let's see, Em, I think you have a couple of other things on here.
This one, I don't know if this was reported or not. Previously, this was a Hackaday article I found about a thing called Apple Newsroom, where someone has, and it's run through a Macintosh, so you're not plugging your 2E or whatever directly into the internet. But the idea is that as news items come up on whatever feed you've subscribed to online, the Apple II prints them out on your dot matrix printer, the old headline style. So you can, I don't know, pretend that you're some like news editor in the 30s and you rip the paper, get this over to that office, whatever. So I just thought that was kind of a cool, almost feels like a throwback to earlier experiments of like, what should we do with the Apple II now that we've connected it to the internet?
It's a nice way to use a dot matrix printer also, because that's
Exactly.
one of the aspects of our retro hobby that are kind of the redheaded stepchild, because printers are sort of useless now and they're loud and you can't get the ribbons for them anymore. So it's not the fun part. It's not playing games. So what do you do with these things that take up space and weigh 50 pounds? But this is nice because it kind of, like you said, it leverages that sort of 30s telegram kind of breaking news kind of aesthetic that the dot matrix printers do have. So it's a nice use of it.
I'm looking at the website of Joshua Coleman who put this together, and he says it basically replaces the noise of a clacky typewriter
Right.
with the noise of a dot matrix printer, which is just as loud.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, there was a lot of mention about that this is a noise experiment, which I thought was pretty cool. For a long time it was like, okay, well, we have these old printers and these old floppy drives. I know what I'll do. I'll like sync them up with the software that makes them sound like they're playing music, with the beeps and the buzzes. And so this is something that at least, I don't know if this is more useful, but it's different.
And on the off chance anyone under 30 is listening, you don't know how loud these things were. Like
Oh my
these were
God.
so ear-splittingly loud. Dot matrix printers were monstrous. They were so loud. It's so much louder than you're imagining. Yeah. And if you're one of us and you haven't listened to one in a while, you've forgotten how loud those things were.
That's right.
I must have forgotten because I remember it being loud. I don't remember it being unpleasant.
Well, I guess some of them were quiet, but I mean, I had an Epson clone of some sort, an MX whatever,
Yeah.
and it was
those
just
Epsons.
it was ear splitting, absolutely ear splitting. Like you had to leave the room.
Well, and in fact, Apple had the silent type printer because advertised because it was quiet and wasn't one of
Yeah.
these Epson LX RXMX noise machines.
Yeah.
Although, as I recall, even the silent type was pretty loud.
Yeah, there was also the Scribe printer that came with the Apple IIc, or was marketed with the 2C, and it was a thermal printer, and it was genuinely silent. And actually, that was really cool. One of my friends had one of those, and I thought I was blown away by that. But it used that weird thermal paper that early fax machines required that faded in like a week.
Curls.
Yes, it was pretty useless as a printer, but it was quiet, and it was pretty neat.
This isn't on the topic of the volume of a printer, but a hardware upgrade that kids today would probably not conceive of, which I remember getting from my ImageWriter, was a printer buffer. Remember those?
Yeah, vaguely.
So basically, it used to be that when you were printing from, say, AppleWorks to your computer was 100% occupied, and you could not do anything with your computer until it was done printing, because the
Right.
data was going from the computer to the printer by byte by byte or so.
Yeah.
So you could install a 32K printer buffer in your printer, and the computer could send the whole file to the buffer, and then that would free up your computer, and the printer would just be printing from the buffer instead of from the computer.
Hmm.
And like this was valuable time that you were reclaiming. I remember buying one from my dad's computer because, again, he was running the company business. And around the same time, he started having some other issue with his computer where, like, I don't remember if it was crashing or something, but he decided that correlation was causation and the printer buffer was
Of
causing his computer to crash. And
course.
he basically, like, he came to me so frustrated. He said, if you can't resolve this in the next weekend, you need to remove the printer buffer. I want it out. I can't
Wow.
have my computer crashing like this. And I was like, I just said, okay. And I went and eventually figured out whatever the issue was, and I fixed it without removing the buffer, because not only did I feel that this was a valuable upgrade, but I also wanted to prove my dad wrong.
I think the other thing that you could do with those was send multiple jobs at once, because some of those AppleWorks things, if you had more than one file to print, you kind of had to wait and then manually initiate the next file, or write some like weird AppleSoft basic thing to try and do it for you, which inevitably failed at some point. But you could send 4 or 5 jobs and come back later, so supposedly freeing up more time, even though the computer was still tied up.
That's twice on this podcast we've talked about multiple jobs.
Ah, I see what you did there. Took me a second, but yeah, it clicked. Yeah, I never had one of those. I think I had forgotten until you all just talked about this, how much your computer was tied up by this. Like you print something in print
Oh
shop and
yeah,
like you had to walk away from your computer for an hour. Like you just lost access to it because it was just
totally.
printing. That was all it could do it. We take that for granted nowadays. You click print and keep working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
In some ways, I kind of miss that. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I can only do one thing at a time. And now, like, I have a app on my Mac that every 20 minutes basically locks the screen and tells me to get up and walk away for 2 minutes. Just like refocus my eyes, get a drink of water, stretch my
Yeah.
legs, whatever. And you didn't need an app to do that because every app did that
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
Apple II.
It's true. It's not a bad thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think a case I was actually texting me recently. I think this is something that they saw online and said AOL had the right idea. 30 hours of internet a month was enough.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah. It's so true.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just walk
Wait,
away. Just
Yeah,
walk
we all
away.
have too much internet now.
I remember what a big deal it was when it may have been Epson, probably was, uh, started selling printers that had that extra buffer built in.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you didn't have to like screw up your dad's computer. And
I found a way to do it anyway. I was always screwing up his computer.
absolutely.
One more thing about the limited access. My friend Bethany once reminisced to me about how the internet used to be a place you went and a thing you did. So like you'd have to go to a room in your house, sit at a desk, dial up to a service and have that experience and then disconnect and then walk away.
Yeah.
And now when you walk away, the internet follows you and there's no discrete time in which it is the internet. The internet is not happening for a certain hour. It's just ubiquitous.
Yeah, it's a good point.
And that's something I like about the Apple II, which is for the most part, it's offline.
Mhm.
Certainly we've added those capabilities to it. But also, like when you walk away from the Apple II, it generally doesn't follow you.
Yeah. Yeah, and nobody would rage troll on Twitter if they were paying a $5 a minute to do it.
There were trolls on CompuServe.
Fair
On a
enough.
300 on a 1200 baud modem.
Yeah, I guess some people will pay for that privilege at any price.
Oh, they will. They will. But you're right. I think at one point they were talking about having like a minimum fee to use Twitter. And one of the reasons was like trolls won't use Twitter if they have to pay for it. I'm like, you don't understand the ROI on spam.
Yeah, clearly, yeah.
Right.
Anyway,
Besides, the troll owns Twitter, so
well, yes. What's this about Record Store Day?
Oh yeah. So today is, or I guess earlier, because it's only the morning thing, like when the store opens, but it's Record Store Day. which started out as this sort of independent promotion to kind of help these smaller indie music stores sell more products. Artists would release special editions of weirdly colored vinyl and extra tracks and stuff like that, and it's become this like big thing where people go and camp overnight to get in the store first because there are more people showing up, but the records are released in limited, like there's only 300 of these or whatever. But I was down there with my friends this morning actually, and we were just kind of scrolling through the like which one should we get, and I saw this. It was for Rockafire Explosion, and something in my head was like, "What? Why does that sound familiar to me?" And it's because it was that animatronic band that played at Showbiz Pizza, and competed with Chuck E. Cheese. And I think Quinn and I actually, there was like a news art item that we talked about a while back where, the guy's name, I can't say it these days without it feeling like a Marvel villain. His name is Aaron Fector, or like, like a second tier villain in Mystery Men or something. His name is Aaron Fector, and he created all these things. And he, I guess, worked with some indie label or something like that, and released a run of never before released songs that this animatronic band had performed at Showbiz. And the reason that there's a connection to the Apple II is because Aaron has talked a lot about using the Apple IIe to program all the animatronics and the tracks for the music and syncing everything, and what he's had to do to like keep those running and making sure that the software worked the way that he wanted to. So I just thought that was kind of cool to like see, like, oh wow, I remember this. So I bought one. I have it.
Oh, that's cool. Do you have a record player?
Turntable? Yes, I do.
I only learned about Record Store Day like last year, but I guess it's been going on for quite a while.
I think it started in like 2005-ish, something like that. And lately it's I don't know, it's kind of become this like, okay, this is clearly cash-in day for artists, and like Taylor Swift, I think, releases like 15 different variants of every single album, and they're all like $60, and it's a little bit, on the one hand, it's their involvement of artists like Taylor Swift and Olivia Rodrigo means that when I go there, the records that I want, nobody's trying to get, because they're all trying to get those. But it has definitely I don't know if there's direct corporate sponsorship yet, but it certainly has a feel of kind of like the fix is in sort of a deal, and this is clearly stopped being just about trying to keep these smaller stores afloat, and it's just about making money.
Why we can't have nice things.
Exactly.
It's cool that there are things to find at this event other than Taylor Swift.
Well, that's true. Although she's generally not at them.
Well, and also I'm certainly not disparaging Taylor Swift music or Swifties.
Oh.
Yeah, no, we would never do that.
No.
No, God, no, we love all of that.
What's it worth to you? Hold on to your wallet as we look at the latest Apple pickings.
So this month on eBay, we're taking a look at some auctions, or auction singular, because I have had this question in my mind for almost a decade. It's something I wish I'd asked my father about when he was still alive, because I don't know if I'll ever have an answer to it now. But I grew up in a household with an Apple II. I don't remember not having an Apple II. And we had so many games that we played. All of them were pirated. None of them came in boxes. None of them had proper labels. These were not games that I was pirating. I was not swapping floppies with my classmates on the playground because none of them had Apple IIs. In hindsight, I wish I knew where these games came from. Like, was my father pirating software? And from who? He was something of a gamer, but not enough of a gamer that he had to have the latest everything. So I wish I knew where these games came from, because I still have those floppies that we pirated 40 years ago, but I have no idea as to their provenance. So I had an idea. Why don't I go online and try to find some of the originals? It's not that I feel ethically obligated to replace everything I played as a kid, but I was just curious, like, it'd be cool to have an original copy of Conan Halls of Volta, just to have it. So I went into eBay and I searched, Apple II Conan, and I found a lot of 30 games for the Apple II, all pirated copies.
Yeah, I was looking at those, especially the screenshots, and to me it felt like that person who's selling this could just as easily have like raided the shoeboxes of discs that I had as a kid because it looked exactly like what I did when I pirated games. So
Right. And he says that he had the originals. He bought them all in one of those storage
sure he did.
locker sales where people didn't claim whatever was in their storage unit. So he says he sold the originals and this is what's left. I haven't really gone through his eBay auction history to see what originals he had or how he sold them or for how much. It seems like this is somebody who just does this, goes to storage units and buys them. I do see a copy here of Dung Beetle for the Apple II, a game from Datasoft, and that looks like an original. It is possible to forge a floppy nowadays, and I don't know if this is
What?
authentic or not. I know, right?
This is an authentic pirated copy.
Oh, it was just interesting to me that he wants 225 bucks for
Yeah.
copies of 30 games, which if you have the hardware to play these floppy disks, it's not a big stretch to imagine you have the hardware to download the disk images off the internet and make floppies or play them in an emulator.
Yeah, it's a bit of a racket.
I was sort of surprised. I hadn't paid much attention to like that part of Apple II eBay stuff. I tend to, go more for the unusual cards and like, oh, what's this chip kind of a deal than stacks of software. But like last time I checked in, I those a stack of discs was a lot less expensive than it is now for and that's like universal. It seems like it's not just some guy overpricing something. It's like everything.
Yeah, and there is weirdly a lot of pirated software being sold, and you don't know if it's vintage pirated or pirated last week. It's hard to tell, but
Exactly.
it is funny that you mentioned that, Ken, because I hadn't thought about this either. But when we had our Apple II, like within a week of getting the machine, we had 20 discs full of pirated games. And like you, my father was not a pirate. He wasn't going out and getting these. So I don't even know where they came from. It was the staples like Sabotage and Artillery and Lemonade Stand and Lady Tut. We all had like kind of the same 20 games, kind of bad file cracks all over the place. And I think maybe the computer store salesman gave them to him. Which, hilarious nowadays to imagine that. But I think the computer store salesman was giving them out. And I think my dad had some adult friends who were pirating who probably came over and gave him some stuff. But yeah, this pirated games just appeared in those days. Nobody knows from where.
Oh, see, my dad, like, he would go to work and take a box of floppies and like trade them with the other people that he worked with. And I don't know, there's something very incongruous to me at the time of like adults do this, but he was never shy about like bringing home like, it's the latest batch of games. Check them out. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, there was never an ethical dilemma about it
no.
for sure.
No.
Yeah, my dad just brought home discs from somewhere, and
he was so excited when he got the latest version of ASCII Express Pro because of all the new stuff that it could do.
Yeah,
and of course it's like a photocopied manual and like handwritten labels on the disc.
Like my dad never had an office or coworkers, so that definitely wasn't his vector. What you suggested, Quinn, makes a certain amount of sense that he might have gotten it from the person who sold him the Apple II. But wouldn't that be the salesperson working contrary to their own existence?
Yeah, I would think so. But there
I don't
was
think the logic really went that way though at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it was just sort of a community thing. Like the salesman was a salesman because he loved computers, and the people that owned the store were mom and pop who loved computers. And yeah, I don't know. Obviously,
And if anything,
it's biting the hand that feeds you in a way. But at the same time, I guess it builds, enthusiasm. And certainly, I went back to that store and bought software later with my allowance. So it was more like marketing, I guess. I don't know.
I was going to say customer loyalty. Like, this is pirated, but like if you remember that I gave you all this, you're probably going to come back here as opposed to go to business land across the street or something.
Yeah, and what they were giving out was old stuff too. Like, I wanted Hard Hat Mac. I didn't want Sabotage. Like Sabotage was two years old by that point in garbage. So I guess they were giving us the older stuff.
Quinn, you mentioned earlier about saving up your allowance for 4 months and you go spend 50 bucks on a game and it's a dud. Do you have a specific memory of that happening to you?
Yes. Technocop. Technocop. I'm bitter about Technocop. And it happened a couple other times as well, but I don't remember any other specific ones off the top of my head.
What about you, Em?
Oh, mine was LA Crackdown, that Epic's game. It was another like cop type game that promised to be like this cop simulation that like barely ran, and it was a stupid storyline, and none of it made any sense. And I was just like, okay, I'm giving this to everyone I know.
Everyone you hate.
Well, I had a little, side story here, I guess. This guy that this guy I knew, everyone had a guy that they knew. I don't know where he got the stuff. He would come over to my house and like he would trade me uh, bare arcade cabinet boards, and I remember this specifically. It was like bare arcade cabinet boards and rare horror movie CDs that he got from Japan, which at the time were very rare and like super expensive. And it was just like the coolest thing for me. Just like what am I going to do with a Pac-Man board? I have no cabinet. I have no way to get a cabinet. It was just cool to have it. And I would just pirate software for him. Like, here's the latest badge. Have at it. That's all.
One Apple II game that I bought for a lot of money was the Magic Candle.
Oh, I remember that game. Yeah.
Yeah, and when I first brought it home, I don't remember exactly how this transition occurred, but I remember bringing it home and hating it. Like I was literally in tears. Like my mom asked me how was it. I was like, it's so terrible.
Oh.
But maybe this was Stockholm syndrome or something, but I kept playing it and I loved it. I think maybe what happened was compared to other Apple II games that I was used to, it had a very steep learning curve. And I think once I got over that and I saw all how the RPG mechanics worked and how really ahead of its time it was in a lot of ways, I was like, oh my gosh, I hated this because it was not like anything else I've ever played. And now I love it because it's not like anything else I've ever played.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was a guest on a gaming podcast just this past week, the Retro Game Room. And every guest, they say, you get to pick a game that we hosts are going to play for the next episode. You won't be here, but you get to dictate the content. And I'm like, the Magic Candle.
Yeah, I had that game. I didn't play it much, but I know that it's well regarded as an early pioneer in a lot of ways for RPG mechanics.
Yeah, there were sequels, but I don't think they came to the Apple II, which is unfortunate because back in the day, with some sequels to games like that, you could load in your old save data and bring the characters forward.
Yeah.
And they promised that you'd be able to do that with the Magic Candle too, but it never happened. Also, I got the name of that podcast wrong. It's the Retro Game Club. Sorry about that. Link will be in the show notes.
I remember, like Origin obviously was known for Ultima and a bunch of like award-winning, amazing games. But the one stinker that for me was that game Times of Lore.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
It's just garbage.
I think I liked it, but I don't remember. It was a very nice looking game, but I don't remember it very well.
Yeah, it didn't play well and nothing made sense. Yeah. I was in my mind, I was like, oh, okay, well, Origin is done.
Anything else we got going on this month?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
We're all caught up. 8 years of news.
That's right. So we can do this once every 8 years, and that's all that happens.
Perfect. That's a schedule we can keep.
Yeah. Well, I am planning on attending virtual KansasFest and IRL INIT HELLO. I think I might be the only one here doing both of those things.
Yeah, I won't be able to attend INIT HELLO in person. So yeah, I might do KFest virtual. I don't know yet.
Yeah, I know that Quinn, you're in Canada, and coming to Maryland has some challenges, shall we say.
Yes, it is complicated at the moment. So
that's a good way to put it.
Unlikely to occur.
Canada is in a relationship with the United States, and it's complicated.
It is. Yes, it's complicated is our status. Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I am not involved in the organization of either of these events, despite decades-long rumors to the contrary. I'm the resident WordPress guy, so I do sometimes help out with WordPress websites, regardless of who's running them, but that doesn't make me an organizer. So I'm looking forward to just like going to INIT HELLO and chilling in the back and seeing what's going on. Seeing some old friends, I hope. Registration is not yet open. I think they're aiming for May 1st, but nothing is confirmed at this time. Same with the price. It does not include room and board like KansasFest does, so it's a very different kind of event, just a weekend long thing. Going to be held at the System Source Museum, which is fun, which I've never been to. So yeah, I maybe we should have mentioned all that in the news, but I'm looking forward to INIT Hello. That is the next big Apple II thing on my agenda, other than putting out the next issue of Juice.js. But yeah, this has been an awesome episode of Open Apple.
Yeah, this was fun. Thank you both.
Thank you.
And for any who may be rediscovering this show or discovering it anew, since it's been a while, where can they find us online?
Well, I'm really only online on YouTube now. I have a YouTube channel that's completely unrelated to retro computing, but I don't do socials anymore. So, yeah, you can Google me at Blondie Hacks, I guess. I do still have a blog actually that has some retro content on it. I do occasional Apple II stuff there and retro related things there.
Cool. And you have a Patreon as well, right?
I do, yeah. So that's all linked. Go to my blog, blondiehacks.com. You'll find me.
Great. And M, you got anywhere you want to plug?
I don't think so. I like Quinn. I'm not on the socials anymore. I won't be at INIT Hello, mostly because I don't want to be near TSA or any of these organizations at the moment that might look at my ID and make assumptions. I have been having a lot of fun writing articles for Juice.js again, and coming up with fun ideas to pitch to Ken. So I guess if you want to follow me, you can subscribe and check out my latest writings. That's a lot of fun.
I appreciate the opportunity to publish your work because it's fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
And your unique ideas also are a unique opportunity for me, because if somebody comes to me and says, I want to review this hardware, I'm like, oh yeah, we publish hardware reviews. Let's do that. I want to interview this person. Oh yeah, we do interviews. Let's do that. And you come to me with this thing I've never even heard of. And I was like, do we do that? And the answer is always yes. And I love the unique perspectives and content on, it's something like, I think one of the feedbacks I shared with you was you wrote a review of Pirates of Silicon Valley to celebrate, was it the 25th anniversary?
I think it was 25th or something like that. Yeah.
And we got a letter from a reader saying, when I opened the issue, I was dismayed to see a 5-page review of a movie I've never seen before. And then I read it, and I can't wait to watch the movie.
Oh.
What a great article. Please tell M I loved it. And I was like, that's how good the article was, is that you don't need that context, that backstory. Your article wasn't aimed at people who have watched a certain movie. It was aimed at people who love the Apple II.
Well, that felt really good to receive that feedback from that person and from you. I don't have a coder brain, so a lot of the I can't here's a cool new tool that I created. Here's how I did it, or here's a new hardware hack that I came up with. I just don't think that way, and so it's fun trying to come up with things that I can write that are relevant, that people might be interested in a hobby that is very coder brain centric and very let's go through this assembly code of this bootloader. I'm just like, oh, kill me now. It's not quite that bad, but it's not something that I would ever be able to write or pull off. So I appreciate the platform to kind of explore other avenues to enjoy our hobby.
And we will publish that bootloader article for the people who enjoy that.
Absolutely. I just want anything to do with that. I did want to take a moment to express some gratitude for you, Ken, because there was a time, around 2018 when I stopped doing this and things were just not going well for me. And I still had, at the time, the Open Apple website and all of the content. I knew that if I held onto it, it would either fall into disrepair or I would just get disgusted with myself and delete it or something. And so when I came to you and said, please take this over and keep it up and running, you were able to do that. And I think in large part that allows us to do things like this today. And so that really means a lot to me. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. I really appreciate that you took the time and effort to reach out to me. A lot of people would just let the domain expire. I hate it when things disappear off the internet, even if it's stuff I'm embarrassed about that I did 20 years ago. You can still read reviews that I wrote and were printed in physical newspapers back in 1997. And those are on the internet. And I look at them and I was like, was I ever that bad a writer?
Right.
But I also look at stuff I wrote for Juice.js 5 years ago and I ask myself the same question. So it's all relative. But yeah, I appreciate that this collaboration continues, whether it's hosting a one-off podcast like this, whether it's just keeping the website up and running, putting all the MP3s in the Internet Archive. They're there too. And maybe we'll do this again sometime.
Yeah. I'll see you both in 8 years.
Absolutely.
This has been the Open Apple Podcast. Find more episodes, read our blog, or send feedback by visiting us on the web at www.open-apple.net.
Think we care? No.